Welcome to Swiftuality, where we meet at the intersection of Taylor Swift and spirituality.
We're your hosts. I'm Megan.
And I'm Hannah.
Welcome back to the podcast. We're super excited about today's episode because we have our very first guest. We have with us one of our classmates from our cohort at Divinity School. Her name is Skyler, and while we were in school together, we kind of took our core classes together. So Hebrew Bible, New Testament, theology, history classes, all of those good ones. So we really went through some times together.
Mm-hmm.
There were good times, there were bad times.
Some trauma bond.
Yes, but welcome, Skyler.
Thanks for having me as a guest.
Oh my gosh, of course. Thank you for being here. So a little bit about Skyler. She graduated with her Master of Divinity, and she is currently a children's ministry director in the United Methodist Church. She also shares our love, maybe obsession with Taylor Swift's music. And she got to be an attender of Minneapolis Night 2, which we will hear about in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think Skylar is a ball of light. You meet her, she has the most contagious, infectious, warm energy. And she's just so fun to be around. So thank you, Skylar, for being here.
Welcome to the pod.
Yay! When y'all called me and asked me to do this podcast, I was so excited because it combines, of course, two of my favorite things.
And that's exactly why we invited you, Skylar. I can't wait to get into your story. But before we do that, there's a few things I want to talk about. The first one being the incredible experience the three of us had together.
Mm-hmm.
We went to this Taylor Swift dance party together in Nashville on a very frigid, cold January night in 2022. And for me, it was kind of one of the first things I did as the pandemic was kind of in a lull, and we were starting to be able to do things. And the three of us went to this dance party, and I had the time of my life. I don't know about you all.
It was amazing. For sure, one of the first big parties and events that I went to after everything started opening up again. I remember sitting in our community room downstairs at the Divinity School and Megan being like, any chance you would want to go to the Taylor Swift dance party? And I was like, oh my gosh, I saw it. I saw ads for it. Yes, automatic. Yes, I want to go.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that we all went and had the best time ever.
Mm-hmm. So it was towards the end of graduation, so I remember being so stressed and overwhelmed with all the things we had to do, but that was such a good breeze to just we're back out in public again, doing what we love. And then the night was Red theme because she just released the Taylor's version Red, and it was so great.
Yeah.
So much fun. There were so many creative costumes, and that was a good intro into what the Eras tour was gonna be like. So many creative costumes and just a great atmosphere of everyone being so kind and just in a room full of Swifties. It was great.
And that was the first time we sang All Too Well 10-minute version in a group of people, just screaming.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was cathartic after the pandemic.
Yeah, screaming fuck the patriarchy with a room of people was
Yes.
so good.
Absolutely. Another fun Swiftie connection that I think the three of us have is we have a deep love for the album Lover, which I think a lot of people don't, for some reason that I don't understand. But for us, this album is so special to us because it came out, I think, the week we started Divinity School.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I remember it coming out. Me had already been on the radio, but then everything else was yeah, it had to have been the week we started or had orientation.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear kind of your connection to it, but for me I was moving, to Nashville, which had always been this thing I never thought I'd get to do, but I, grew up listening to country music. So it was so fun to be in Nashville, be close to Taylor, and then to just start this fresh new chapter of my life, which I needed so badly. A fresh start to kind of like figure out, I don't know, who I was and who I wanted to be as I was starting divinity school and, then my career. It was just a really special time. And I think that album really marks that time for me.
For sure.
Yeah, because like my commute, I remember like that's just all I listened to. And we have that like garage that we have to like go up to like the 5th floor to park. So I just remember the loop I have to make and then playing. Okay, London Boy was my favorite song. And now I'm so sad that I cannot listen to that anymore.
Yeah. You can still listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a little different. It's tainted, perhaps.
But yeah, totally was like the soundtrack of divinity school for me.
Lover for me was definitely the album that like brought me back to Taylor. And I don't want to say that like I fell out of love with Taylor, because I didn't. But for me, like Speak Now, Fearless, Red, those were like my albums. And when 1989 came out, I was just going to undergrad. I went to like this small college and like nobody else liked Taylor. And so for me, it was like, it was a thing that I had kept hidden of like, yeah, I'll listen to her music, but I like won't tell anyone else. And then like Reputation came out and I liked the music, but I just like, that wasn't my era at the moment. And so when Lover came out, it was like the perfect time in my life. I had been married for a year, so I had like found my lover. Aww. And I just remember like starting every day. I would leave my house at like 5:30 in the morning to get to divinity school, but I remember like always putting that on in the car every morning and being like, this is like so much joy. It like sparked so much joy for me. And it just felt like such a real moment. One of our other friends from divinity school, I remember being like, oh yeah, I was listening to like Taylor Swift on the way to school. And she was like, oh my gosh, me too. And I was like, oh, it's like not something I have to hide that I love listening to her music. So it was a good era of my life.
Yeah.
The other thing that I was just thinking of too was, and I think he knows, she talks about skipping down 16th Avenue, which is like Music Row in Nashville.
Yes.
And our last year, like I parked right off 16th Avenue every day because I didn't want to pay for a parking pass. And so I just have so many memories of having to walk 20 to 30 minutes. But I'm like, I'm skipping down 16th Avenue.
Aww.
Which is so fun.
Yeah.
And just be like, a baby Taylor was here.
It was such a good time to live in Nashville, too, for us, because when we were living there, eventually, like, Folklore Evermore come out, and in Invisible String, she talks about Centennial Park.
Yeah.
That was always good. Driving by, I would be like, oh, I'm gonna put Invisible String on.
Yeah. Very sweet times. Well, Skyler, let's tell the audience a little bit about you. Tell us who you are, kind of your journey, where you've been.
Yeah, so a little bit about myself and my journey. So I grew up in the church. I grew up United Methodist, and for me, I really fell in love with the community aspect that church was for me. Church was this family that was outside of my home. It was the place that like I always wanted to go to. And as I grew older and grew up, I really fell in love with the like United Methodist theology of grace and radical love and how those are acted out in community and connection. And so now I work in the United Methodist Church and will eventually go for ordination to become a pastor in the United Methodist Church.
Amazing.
But taking my time. So a little bit more about me. One huge aspect of my life is that I'm an adoptee. So I grew up in a home with 2 loving parents. I was adopted right after I was born. But that ends up like having a lot of impact on how I understood what love meant. As a girl growing up in middle school and high school, I just really struggled to understand how loving someone could impact a life. and what that meant for my personal healing and journey. And yeah, so I think Taylor, for me, was there through a lot of that exploration of figuring out what love is. She was able to explain what love was in her music, and like, yes, it's like frilly, cute love stories, but also the way she's able to explain emotions was so important for me as a girl in middle school and high school who was like trying to understand if it was okay. Now that I'm older, I'm an Enneagram 7, so emotions are not something that I love to talk about or think about, and so Taylor is that like easy avenue for me to express my emotions through her music. I often think about like songs that made the most impact on me, of like I would sit in my bed at night listening to my Speak Now CD and my Fearless CD. I would sing the lyrics of You're Not Sorry and like know that that's okay to be angry and it's okay to be upset and angry. And I would sing Never Grow Up and know that like my parents who love me feel that way about me. So those are the albums that like hit so close to home. All of those re-recordings are so close to me because they helped me truly grow up and understand love and emotions and empathy in new ways I couldn't express at that age.
Yeah. Can you say more, Skylar, about being an adoptee? Kind of what were you experiencing in middle school and high school? Can you just say more about searching for identity?
Yeah.
For those who are not adopted or don't have someone adopted close to them.
Yeah. So for me, I was adopted again at a young age. I did not know my biological family until I was much older. I didn't know much of my own story, my own heritage. So I was really trying to figure out, like, because I didn't know who my birth mother was or who my birth father was, I thought so much that that would have a huge impact on my life.
So it was like kind of you got to that age and you were just starting to think about like, oh, where do I come from? And that sort of thing.
So much about where do I come from? The question of, what is it? Environmental
like
versus...
nature versus nurture.
Nature versus nurture, thank you. Yeah, so much of what I was thinking about at the time was this nature versus nurture of, is it nature that I'm like this, or is it the nurture aspect? Who is having these impacts? Who am I as I grow up? And for me, I was abandoned as an infant. So that has another layer of trauma and impact of feeling unloved, like somebody didn't love me enough to keep me. And so all of these things are like happening while I am thinking and growing, and the middle school age is already difficult enough, and then to add those traumas on top of it, it actually ended up that church and Taylor were the two things that helped me process a lot of those emotions for myself.
For sure.
I think a lot of us can relate to the like Taylor teaching us about our emotions.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's just, yeah, so crazy that she really does cover so many emotions that we just so easily like relate to our own lives.
For sure.
What are some songs that you had on repeat as you're going through some of this stuff?
Yeah, those early albums.
Yeah, I mean, for one, like I said, You're Not Sorry was one that, like, yes, she, like, wrote it about a boy, but, like, when I was growing up, I would, in my brain, like, sing that to people who I thought had abandoned me or had done, like, so much of that was just a way to express my own anger of a situation that didn't relate to Taylor's, but totally just like felt like it related to my own life. I loved White Horse. That was on repeat Forever and Always, the acoustic version. I remember having it on my little like $30 MP3 player on the school bus and like listening to it over and over again. There was so much. I would play my CDs every night before I went to bed, so I would like go through all the tracks. Never Grow Up was a great one. But yeah, I think White Horse, Forever and Always, Begin Again. When Red came out, it was right around my birthday, and we made a special like hour trip to the Target away from our house to go get my CD. Yeah.
That's so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of themes of coming of age in Taylor's music, which we're going to get into in another episode. But I just love how your story just really highlights those like learning. Like White Horse is such about like, oh, I'm losing this fairy tale of like what life should be or could be, and I'm angry about it. Like I'm angry, you know, and you're not sorry. She talks about like, yeah, you did me wrong and I'm mad about it. Like I'm pissed. And that's so much part of like, okay, how do I take this anger and how do I be okay with it going forward? Yeah.
So much of that is what impacts me about Taylor. Like it's why I've always loved her music and will continue to love her music. I think for me, going to divinity school in fall of 2019, right as Lover came out, it was this period of like we talked about, like going to div school. It was this new era of all of our lives, and so much of div school is deconstructing what you did know or what you came in with and going forward to reconstruct what you believe. And so Lover was just like a constant. I would, you know, do all this work at divinity school and, you know, it's a lot of emotional and intellectual work. And Lover would be the thing that I came back to in the car to be like, okay, this is going to be my calm down before I go home and not take some of this work. It's impossible not to take deconstruction like with you. But for me, I needed that space to be able to like do work in one place and also have my joy in another.
I totally relate to that. I kind of remember being like, this is going to be my anchor. Listening to Taylor on my commute is going to be my anchor of like, she's been with me a long time and she's like still here. It was almost like a safe space to kind of become someone new.
Yes.
I think I've mentioned this before, but Taylor's a monument for me of like, you know, each album I can remember where I'm at in each, and I think it's so grounding, but it's not devoid of thinking too. Like I remember listening to False God and like also Daylight we're going to talk about, but it continues that process of thinking and doing, but in a way that feels familiar, you know, like feels like this is the voice that's always been in my head and it's continuing to like evolve and grow with me, and that's so comforting and grounding. Yeah.
And she makes it like fun and sexy in False God.
Oh yeah.
So after divinity school, we all graduated in 22. So we were the class of 22, and Taylor dropped 22 merch, which was so fun. I have some that my friend bought me.
I was a little offended she did the NYU speech and not the Vanderbilt graduation speech.
Yes.
You know.
It's fine. We'll just adapt her speech to
every day.
our own,
I do.
Exactly. All the time. Yeah. So after I graduated, I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. My husband had taken a job here. I found a job working at a church here in Charlotte. So I'm the director of children, youth, and family at First United Methodist Church in Charlotte. Having a blast living here, and I love working with all the kids and, you know, bringing that joy into their theology and their spirituality, hopefully teaching them so that they don't have to do as much deconstructing as some of us have to do. And that's always the goal.
I kind of want to go back and ask about like the beginning. You mentioned that you fell in love with the doctrine of grace. What does that mean to you and why?
I think for me, so much of grace is that so much of what we refuse to forgive in ourselves and in others is what we're called to do. And so grace is an act of justice, is how so much of the United Methodist Church views grace. Everything is surrounded by this grace of God. We have multiple different words for grace in the United Methodist Church. Sanctifying grace is one of those that's really impactful, and knowing that like God is going to be there no matter what, that this divine grace and love is there whenever and however, and no matter what you've done or will do, it's there for you. And that's just kind of changed how I have viewed, the Bible and theology and my whole life as a disciple and as a follower of Christ.
Good summary.
Can you talk, maybe, I don't know if there's anything that comes to your mind about like working with kids and kind of seeing their spirituality, or what do you like learn from the kids?
Oh my gosh, I learned so much from the kids. I feel like so much of my life had been in chaos in like 2021, and I was so determined to like find joy in the year of 2022. So like I remember going to that Taylor event in January and being like, this lives into my year of joy. Graduation lived into my year of joy. And I started this job with the kids and realized that like they bring me so much joy because they teach me about God in ways that I didn't know were possible. They show me radical hospitality in ways that like so many adults would be uncomfortable with. My church is in downtown Charlotte, and we have a large unhoused population around us, and so many of our kids are just so willing to like go and talk to anyone and give anyone a hug and like show that love and grace. So carefree. So yeah, I think sharing that form of spirituality, of living into this form of community with each other, changes so much of what we can do as we grow up in a religion if we base it in communities of justice and communities of grace and love.
Yeah. So that kind of seems like that's a lot of that is like the framework of how you view spirituality in general. Do you have any more thoughts about like what is spirituality to you?
For sure. I mean, spirituality, I can't dissect it from being in community. So much of myself and my own spiritual journey comes from those who have walked alongside me, those pastors who have taught me and led me, or my friends that I've met in divinity school who have taught me different things or shared different parts of their life that then have an impact in my own. So much of that connectiveness is the thread of God's grace and love in our lives that I view as this like melting pot of coming together. So for me, spirituality is the ways that we connect to the divine or with God in community. And some of that is, even if community isn't being in person for you, maybe that community is finding an author that you relate to, and that author becomes your community. That author or that poet become part of that connected web of connection for you.
I love that. Yeah, it just reminds me of what I've talked about already in previous episodes, is that like community, we like also experienced that at the Eras tour. And that, I don't know, just how powerful it can be, even just with Taylor's music, to like see and be seen in experiences. And how, we like get love from that and accept ourselves, like learn to have grace for ourselves is something that's been big for me. And that, so I don't know, did you experience that kind of at the Eras tour too?
Oh my gosh, yes. I loved the Eras Tour as an experience. So much for me was like that joy and that like essence of girlhood, of just like being in a large community, like an uber large community of people who were just so supportive and loving. I didn't hear anyone ever say a bad word about anyone else. Everyone was just complimenting each other's outfits. There was so much body positivity. For me, I was coming out of this like really weird spring where I was still adjusting to like living in Charlotte. My husband and I living by ourselves, creating our community, which takes like a lot of work and a lot of emotional tolls
And
sometimes. Yes, we had to rehome a dog that we had loved. So I was just like in this really weird space, like not feeling like the best in my body either. And walking into that concert, I was like blown away at how positive the whole experience was. I think a smile was like plastered on my face the whole night. So yeah, I went to Minneapolis night 2. I flew all the way up to Minneapolis. One of my college roommates and really, really, really good friends, her name's Natalie. Shout out to Natalie because she's the best.
Hi, Natalie.
Was able to get us tickets in the queue. So after a very stressful day of multiple FaceTimes and tears, she was able to get us tickets, and I'm so grateful. So we sat in the lower bowl on the left side of the stage, about 20 rows up, almost like in the center square of the runway. So like great spots, loved our seats. It was fun. The whole stadium in Minneapolis is purple. So everyone was like, oh wow, they painted it for Speak Now release. Like so fun. Just like such a positive vibe. I had tried not to like see any spoilers of the show. So I like knew the set list and kind of the order, but like to watch the trees come up forevermore, to watch like the tolerated scene, I had no idea
either.
about.
That was amazing.
It was, I like was crying. It was so good. I loved it. We got to the point in the show that it was like surprise song o'clock, and I had written out a whole list of like songs that I really thought that she could play. It was Pride weekend in Minneapolis that weekend, so we all thought she was gonna play Me, and so I just like had expectations of surprise songs, but was blown out of the water because we had gotten Dear John and Daylight at Minneapolis night 2.
Lucky.
I know. So good. So good. Dear John was, of course, one of those that like I played over and over and over again on my Speak Now CD. So never in a million years did I think that we would get Dear John. I just didn't think she would play it before Speak Now released. She played it like 2 weeks before and gave a little speech about it to be nice. Loved that. So like the whole crowd is going crazy for Dear John, and then she like goes to the piano and like quietly starts playing Daylight, and like everyone screams and all the lights go from purple to pink, and it was just this surreal feeling for me because Daylight has always been one of my favorite songs on Lover. It's the song that ends the album. It would be like my calm down song. That outro that she says at the end of it of like, I want to be known for the things that I love, not the things that I hate. That has like such a huge impact on me, and I would listen to that and then the album would start over again, and it was just such a good leeway into the whole album for me. So Daylight was one of those songs that I was like, I cannot believe she's playing this right now. And many people like joked about like, oh, what would you do if she played like one of your favorite Taylor Swift songs? And I had turned to my friend Natalie and I was like, I will be getting a tattoo at this point. So I still have a plan to get like a little sun tattoo with some fun rays, because it's just such an impactful song for me. And to be coming out of this era of my life when I just like felt so weird, like not settled, and to hear her sing Daylight live was just like healing. To be able to hear Let It Go and hear 90,000 people screaming Let It Go.
That does sound very healing.
Yeah.
I wish I was there for that. Do you have like any certain lyrics, Skylar, that like, I don't know, what are the ones that go straight to your heart?
Oh, Daylight lyrics are just so impactful to me. There's a couple that I'll point out. One is the like, I don't want to look at anything else now that I saw you. Part of that for me has been looking at like, when I am at my healthiest, when I am mentally and spiritually and physically well, like I don't want to be anything else besides that. Like I don't want to go to those dark places. I don't want to like fall back. And when I look at myself when I am at my best, that is what I want. And so often for me, that's being surrounded by those people in my life that have brought me to that place or have pulled me along when I needed pulled along. Yeah. I think like I've been sleeping so long in a 20-year dark night, like those moments when you know you've been at your lowest for a time when you're like, gosh, I just need something to pull me out. Like I just need someone or something. Or for me, it's always like as a 7, I love events and adventure and joy, anything that sparks joy for me. And so like I'm always looking towards the next great thing. And the Eras Tour was that, of like, I'm looking towards the next greatest thing, which is the Eras Tour, and it's gonna pull me out of this like dark night. Oh, so big, so good. Yeah, and then I think a lot of the color alliteration is so beautiful. I once believed love would be burning red, and I think when she says burning red, my thoughts immediately go back to the album Red and like where I was when that album came out, what 14-year-old Skylar was thinking about when Burning Red came out, and the misconceptions I had about love and grief and anger, and that like grief and anger should be bottled up and love will maybe someday come around. And like now that I'm older now, I see love as golden and as daylight, and like it is that bright and beautiful thing that is never gonna dim or go away. What are some of the lyrics from Daylight that you all love?
I think the line before that, I once believed that love would be black and white, but it's golden. For me, this song is more of like deconstruction, post-deconstruction assurance. It's like growing up, you know, like you're taught to believe in the black and white, you know, and just kind of like fear of hell and, you know, eternal damnation and all of that was very prominent for me growing up. But now, you know, like the kind of like love is black and white. Like for God to love me, I have to be holy, I have to be good, all of that, you know. And now like having a new understanding of who God is and how I relate to God, or just my spirituality in general, like I just feel like it's golden. It's just like freeing, like this kind of like after dark, dawn breaks, and like it's a new scene. Like it sheds light into the places that I haven't seen light before. It's just like a liberating feeling for me. And I think the same like lines that you point out, Skylar, I don't want to look at anything else now that I saw you, been sleeping so long in a 20-year dark night. It's just kind of like this constant just striving and like living in fear, you know, of like the dark, or being wrong, not being seen as good. All of that fear is just like, now that I'm on the other side, I feel free, and I feel like, I don't know, like now I just see things differently, and my relationship to like the Bible, to the church, like all of that's changed. I don't know. It's just like shedding like light into darkness and just seeing things in a different way and feeling free is what I get out of this song.
Yeah. I think I'm kind of similar. I don't necessarily, I mean, the lyrics that you all have talked about, I think, are the ones that I'm drawn to a lot too, but I love this concept of, you know, maybe when you're younger or like at a different stage in life, you think that life is this one way, or that, you know, she uses the example of love is this one way. And then as you keep having different experiences, like it's kind of freeing when you look back and think, you know, I thought this was like as big as the world was, or, you know, this is the extent of what life had to offer me. And then to realize that, oh no, it felt like that back then, but I've learned through experiences, even though they might have been really difficult experiences, I've come to the other side of it, and I've come to this like new understanding of what it means to love, what it means to be a person. So I just love that concept of like, I've been through some really hard things, some really dark things. And yeah, it's just this, I don't know, song about hope for me, of that things aren't always going to be the way they are right now. It's going to change and life's going to go on.
Yeah.
That's so good. I think a lot of that is like why she put Dear John and Daylight together, of like, yes, these things have happened, and like, yeah, it wasn't great, but like I'm moving forward. I'm out of, like, I have stepped into the daylight. I have moved past.
So good.
Yeah. I want to read her like little outro, just because it's so good. She says, I want to be defined by the things that I love, not the things that I hate, not the things I'm afraid of, the things that haunt me in the middle of the night. I just think that you are what you love.
That last line, I love it. The things that haunt me in the middle of the night, like how many of us have like either not been able to sleep because of things that our brains keep thinking of, or things that we're worrying about or scared of, or past events that we can't stop reliving, and letting that go and just thinking about you are what you love.
Yeah, and having that, like, going back to what we were talking about earlier, the grace for yourself in those situations. Like, you can be really hard on yourself, and then, you know, one day you might learn to let that go and learn to love yourself or to forgive yourself. I think that's really powerful. Yeah. Well, this was a really fun episode to talk about, and we just got into some really good topics. So thank you, Skylar, so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this was such a good discussion and great song to bring. So thanks so much, Skylar.
Always. Thank you all.
Of course. Well, if you feel like you have a Swiftie story or a certain song that means something to you and you want to be on the podcast, feel free to email us at swiftduality.podcast@gmail.com. Send us your story. We'd love to connect. And we hope that you'll come back and listen to our next episode.
Whoop whoop.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.